Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Football. Today, we are going to be reviewing the NFL divisional round games. We had four really good matchups to set ourselves up for the conference championships. We also got the NFL award finalists out, so we're going to take a look at that and try to predict who's going to win each award. My name is Andrew Howe, joined, of course, again by Xavier. Xavier, how are you doing today?
I'm great as always. How are you?
I'm doing very good. You had yourself a pretty fun, exciting weekend. We'll get into what you did in just a little bit, but let's start off with talking about the games in the divisional round that first happened on Saturday. Let's start off with the AFC number one seed, the Kansas City Chiefs, going and hosting the Houston Texans at Arrowhead. They win this one 23-14. Xavier, it felt like this was a relatively close game all game long, but the Chiefs always had the upper edge, and that was kind of what we were expecting when we went into this one.
Yeah, it just felt like a regular Chiefs game, to be honest. And CJ Stroud tried his best, and of course I wanted them to win, but of course they're the Chiefs. And an average Mahomes game, I guess, and then they just ended up coming with the win.
Yeah, I mean, it all came down to the fourth quarter, right? I mean, Houston scored a touchdown, unfortunately missed the extra point. Kami Fairbairn uh, was a topic of conversation for the entire day. He had, I think, a missed field goal and a missed extra point. So that was definitely a big turning point in the game. And the Kansas City Chiefs basically scored all the points in the fourth quarter except for the safety at the very end of the game. So that was all that they needed. And I think the big person who really showed up for them was Travis Kelsey, right, Xavier? I mean, he played so good for them in this game. 7 receptions for 117 yards, including that touchdown, which was a crazy play by him and Mahomes in the end of the fourth quarter.
Yeah, Mahomes just falling down and just giving that pass. What a vintage Mahomes play! And of course, Travis Kelsey's going to show up in the playoffs when Taylor Swift's there. And 7 receptions for 117 yards and a tutty.
Yeah.
Great game.
Did you see that Caitlin Clark was at the game with Taylor
Yeah,
Swift too? That was pretty cool, right? Especially because she's such a big Chiefs fan. Or she's such a big Chiefs fan, as she said on the podcast a couple weeks ago. So that was really cool. On the other side for Houston, unfortunately, it didn't necessarily go their way. CJ had an okay game, didn't throw for any touchdowns. It felt like they kept getting pretty close to scoring or getting into the end zone, but just weren't able to convert on those opportunities. But overall, after what was a very slow end to the regular season for Houston, I think they bounced back pretty nicely and won yet another playoff game.
yeah, and I mean, there's nothing really to hang your heads on if you're losing to the Chiefs. But of course, I felt like a lot of people thought the Chargers were gonna win that game, and they proved a lot of doubters wrong, and they won that game at home. And yeah, it just felt like they weren't able to convert on those like third downs and like key situations, I feel like.
Definitely. So we're gonna be keeping an eye on that as we on the Chiefs, of course, as that I feel like was the most boring game of the week because what happened later that night was the Detroit Lions hosting the Washington Commanders in the NFC, but things did not go the same way for the number one seed over there. The Lions get shocked and upset. Final score 45-31. The Commanders are going to the conference championship game. Brian Robinson had two touchdowns. Jaden Daniels played out of his mind, Xavier. Just a really great game from the Commanders, and the Lions had some costly mistakes that ended up being bad for them at the end.
Yeah, and holy cow, Jaden Daniels in the divisional round against what people thought was the best team in the NFL. It shows up and throws 299 yards, two tutties, and no picks, and that's just crazy for a rookie quarterback to do under such circumstances. And it was honestly like a great game in the first half, but then the Commanders started pulling away, and it was literally just back and forth at one point. In the second quarter, they scored like a combined 42 points, which is insane. And yeah, it was really costly. Those Jared Goff three picks, one of them happening to be a pick six, and another one in the end zone where they could have scored. And then, yeah, Commanders ended up coming on top by 14 points.
Yeah, I feel like the first interception, first pick six, I was like, okay, like that's pretty bad, but at least the Commanders can get back, or at least the Lions can get back into this one a little bit. The interception in the end zone when they could have cut it to a one possession game at the end of the half, that felt like it was like, oh man, this could actually be like a bad thing for Detroit. And yeah, Jared Goff just really not playing super well this game. Just three interceptions. It was probably his worst game. Not his worst game of the year because he had another game where he threw five
Yeah,
interceptions. But this was that's not a good one for him. Amon-Ra still had a good game. I think the defense just again hard to put too much blame when Jared Goff threw three interceptions and the Commanders got really good field position a lot of the time. But I mean, I think this is just a big testament to how good this Commanders team was in the postseason this year.
yeah, and people were kind of questioning them around like mid late season, but now they proved doubters wrong. And I honestly feel bad for Jameer Gibbs because I felt like he was like averaging like I don't know like around like what was it? Oh, he's averaging like 7.5 yards per carry, which is insane. And you just got Jared Goff over there throwing three picks, and he also only went 23 out of 40, which isn't very good.
Yeah. So I mean, overall though, we'll talk about the lines a little bit more later on in the show, but really felt like this was their year, right? But unfortunately, some injuries happened, and then just a couple of players had some bad games, and they ran into the hottest team in the NFL at this point, which was the Commanders. So we'll get back to them in just a bit, but let's move on to your game, Xavier, the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Los Angeles Rams. You were in Philly for this one. First of all, just describe what it was like to be at Lincoln Financial Field to watch this playoff game.
Absolutely crazy. The atmosphere was insane, and like there's so many fans. And of course, it was a snow game, which like upped the atmosphere even more. It was just like really fun, and of course, it was a great game.
Yeah, fantastic game. Eagles winning it 28-22. There's a lot that you could talk about with this one. Puka having some really nice catches, Matthew Stafford having a great game overall, but the big name, of course, Saquon Barkley. 205 yards, two massive touchdown runs, including one that iced the game at the very end. Rams got close to coming back and maybe taking the win last second, but the last ditch drive from Matt Stafford just was not enough. I mean, just what a game overall from Saquon Barkley, though, Xavier.
Yeah, and of course, he kind of carried this offense. I feel like, Jalen Hurts didn't really have necessarily a great day, and he's had 26 carries and 205 yards, absolutely pounding the ball. And also, you feel that he must get a little tired, but of course not. And he's just like pounding it even more towards the end of the game. And those two big touchdowns in the end were really massive for the Eagles team.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like the Rams could have potentially been on their way back. I mean, it was a really, after that touchdown from Saquon, it was like 4 or 5 minutes left in the game, and they were down 15 or down 13, but then Stafford leads a really nice drive down the field, which put it to within six. Then a quick three and out from the Eagles, and then almost a miracle for the Rams, but just not enough. I mean, there was a really nice catch from Puka to get them in position, but it just was not enough for them to come away with it at the end.
Yeah, I was really scared on the 10-yard line. The defense for Eagles, I thought, had an amazing game with just all those sacks and the two fumble recoveries. And they came really close on the 10-yard line, but that Jalen Carter sack at the end came in really clutch for the Eagles D.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, overall for the Rams, though, I'm really happy that they were able to win that first playoff game. After the fires that happened in Los Angeles, and I think they put up a really good fight here in Philly. The turnovers were a big issue, were a big problem in this game for them, though. Like, do you think the snow played any factor in that at all?
Well, there was a few times where there's a bit of drops, but of course it affects kind of for both teams a bit. And like those like really like usually like throw the ball up and hope catches it. That's like almost 0% in like the snow. I feel like
Yeah.
in the game. And also Darius Slay had a great game. I thought he had like three passes defended or something like that. Crazy.
Yeah, two lost fumbles. One of them was very clearly because of the snow with Kyron Williams. I think that was in the second half sometime. So that was definitely another big thing that helped the Eagles win. So I mean, overall, the Eagles just such a strong team, top to bottom. Their defense played really solid. Their offense is so well rounded. I think this is a really scary team going into the postseason. But speaking of scary teams heading into the divisional or heading into the conference championship round, let's talk about our last game: the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens. This was the most hyped up matchup, and boy, did it deliver. The Bills coming out with a really early lead after Lamar Jackson had a rough first half, but at the end, it was just not enough. Lamar tried to come back, but just a couple of mistakes, including a couple of big drops by Mark Andrews, resulted in the Ravens falling. Final score 27-25 Bills, Xavier. What did you think of this game?
Yeah, and it definitely did not disappoint. And the Ravens really fell behind early, which I feel like was a little disadvantage to them. Only scoring 10 points in the first half, the Bills at 21. And then in the third quarter, they scored all the points and they came back. And then uh, on the top of my head, all I'm thinking about is that Mark Andrews drop at the end. I feel so bad for him. And I mean, honestly, he had in his hands, but it's just tough. And yeah, and also that lost fumble by him. Not to blame the loss on him, of course. They just had like a lot of the turnovers and stuff that Lamar lost fumble was big. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so tough for the season to end like that for Mark Andrews after he led the entire NFL in touchdown receptions for tight ends. And I mean, that's just not how his season really went. But yeah, some very costly mistakes. Definitely should have tried to go down as soon as he made that reception instead of, continuing to go, which ended up him losing the fumble. That was a really big play because that was a drive that felt like the Ravens offense was really starting to cook, especially with Mark Andrews, who of course just came up with that big grab. And I think the craziest thing that is going to get forgotten through all of this is that Lamar Jackson pass to Isaiah Likely, that touchdown pass to get them two within two right before the 2 point conversion. That was such a wild play. Lamar was scrambling all over the place and was falling down as he threw it to Likely, and it's just not going to get remembered because of that failed 2 point conversion, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it was definitely possible that they did not convert on that touchdown too. So and also shout out to the Bills defense for only holding Derrick Henry to 84 yards.
Yeah.
And for him that's pretty big for Bills D.
Yeah, I felt like both defenses actually played relatively well. Again, I think a good chunk of the Bills like scoring ended up coming down to some of the turnovers that Baltimore had, especially in the first half. There was that interception that Lamar threw that was very uncharacteristic, just completely missed his target and went right into the defender's hands. And then there was, of course, the fumble, which resulted in Josh Allen scoring two touchdowns in the first half. So overall, really disappointing way for the Ravens season to end because they were playing such good football, right? Wasn't it? I felt like they were almost like the team of destiny, but also so were the Bills.
Yeah, true. And of course you're playing the Bills, so like they're obviously gonna come out with the fire and it was just a great game and of course it didn't disappoint. I know a ton of people were really looking up to this game and boy it was great. And yeah, Josh Allen, but just like he only had 127 yards, but I feel like he had more, just this like presence on offense. And yeah.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting comparison because I think a lot of people were criticizing Jalen Hurts for his playoff performance in the game and just like overall because he doesn't throw a lot of the time, just hands it off to Saquon. But you actually look at the numbers between him and Josh Allen, very similar, except for the fact that Josh Allen had two rushing touchdowns, Jalen Hurts just had one. So that's an interesting way to think about it as we continue to go forward, and if potentially these two teams meet in the Super Bowl, which is definitely a real possibility.
Yeah, and of course, Jalen Hurts had 70 rushing yards, not too bad, and Josh Allen had two rushing touchdowns. So like you can't really blame the quarterbacks a lot.
Definitely. Okay, well that does it for the recap of the games. The last thing I want to talk about, but with the divisional round though, is with the Kansas City Chiefs. It feels like there's always this conversation about, oh, the Chiefs are, it's rigged for the Chiefs. They're always too good. And I think a big topic of conversation was the refereeing in that game against the Houston Texans. There was some questionable PI calls, and I think the big one was Patrick Mahomes running towards the sideline and then, maybe faking, you're trying to slow down to try to draw the penalty. What did you think about all that? And do you think that the Texans deserved having a lot of those penalties, or were the refs being a little bit too unfair?
I felt like the refs were kind of being a little unfair. Not to hate, you know, um, like I know a lot of people would say like if Josh Allen did that, they wouldn't call it, but I definitely don't feel like it's like that big of a thing, but it just happens a lot. Like I feel like they're like I don't know, they're like Mahomes is like good drawing penalties or something, but like I really hate it.
Yeah, the slowing down. I mean, I feel like there's a big topic of conversation with just quarterbacks and how the NFL has tried to protect them over recent years, and how some quarterbacks have tried to take advantage of that with like things like fake sliding. And I think the Mahomes play was another example of that, where the whole reason that there's roughing the quarterback penalties is to try to keep the quarterback safe. But if the quarterback is putting himself at risk intentionally, that means that the penalties are kind of maybe not as fair. And this came down to the Houston Texans again. Like their defense has been coming under scrutiny in the like this season as well when it comes to drawing penalties on quarterbacks. Remember, they were the team that hurt Trevor Lawrence in that one game against the Jaguars as well. So that is why there's maybe some extra eyes on the roughing the quarterback claims. But I agree, it was I think a little bit soft, and I hope that the refereeing is a little bit better for the Chiefs' next game against the Bills.
Yeah, and like there's all these like memes around like about like protecting the almighty Mahomes, but some of it actually I feel like is kind of true.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's just like the protecting the quarterback rule is getting a little out of hand in some Chiefs games.
Definitely. So we'll see how it goes. I know I saw something that the refereeing squad for the AFC Championship game actually historically draws a lot of penalties. So that's not necessarily the best thing for fans, but hopefully we get a fair, fun conference championship weekend starting this Sunday. We're gonna take a quick break from talking about the actual games that are gonna be happening to focus on some of the off-season awards or off-season things that have been going on as well. Some head coaching decisions have been made across the league. Most notably, the Lions losing both of their coordinators. Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator, going over to the Chicago Bears, and Aaron Glenn, their defensive coordinator, going over to the New York Jets. Now, Dan Campbell was known for having really good coordinators by his side in Detroit. Now they're both going to other teams. Xavier, I guess the first question I have is, what do you think about the hires for both the Bears and the Jets? Do you think that these guys are going to help their teams?
Yeah, definitely. And like you really like anyone any other like person in the league, I feel like well, I bet Ben Johnson is gonna do a great job filling in Matt Eberflus. Of course, he was not the best, and Ben Johnson did honestly an amazing job as an offensive coordinator. And I think he'd also win one of the assistant coach of the year. He could end up winning this assistant coach of the year award maybe, and that's definitely deserving of him. And also Aaron Glenn, he's a great defensive coordinator. Of course, when they're all banged up, they still manage to not shut down some offenses, but like do a great job holding up. And I think he's better than Jeff Ulbrich, just because like he doesn't have a lot of experience and stuff. Like I don't even like know.
Yeah, it's interesting that the Jets got another defensive-minded coach after Saleh was definitely a defensive-minded coach, and they ended up firing him. So interested to see what that looks like. And I think the big thing is that both of these guys were calling plays and had really good success for the Lions. And the Lions, of course, are one of the best teams in the NFL. Does this make you worried about the Lions at all? Or do you think Dan Campbell will be able to right the ship and find some good replacements with the already stacked roster that he has?
Well, I feel like this is what happened to the Eagles when they had Shane Steichen and they had Brandon wait. And they had the offensive coordinator, and then they both ended up going. Oh yeah, Brandon Gannon. He ended up going to the Cardinals, and then Shane Steichen ended up going to the Colts. And then the Eagles, they tried to fill them, but they definitely weren't as great. I feel like sometimes I wish we had them back, but I feel like it might decline because like the offensive like playbook for the Lions is like so complex with all like the trickery they do.
Yeah.
Um, also the defense tough if they still have injuries next year.
Yeah, I mean, all I know is I heard a lot of really good things about both those coordinators, and so I'm interested to see what Dan Campbell can do to, bring some of that magic back. I'm very curious though to see what Ben Johnson's able to do with Caleb Williams as his quarterback, because I feel like he loves his trick plays, and this could be an opportunity for him to do some really cool stuff with somebody who's so athletic, can run around a lot, and also has such a great arm.
Yeah, definitely. I'd be fun to see that with just like yeah, like you said, athletic, and he's like just does all these crazy plays. And yeah, I wonder what he can do with that offense.
Okay, well, before we get into the conference championship games, the NFL awards. Finalists were announced. There's a bunch of them, and we're going to go through each of them and try to pick who's going to win each award. Let's start with the MVP. The five finalists for the MVP were Josh Allen, Saquon Barkley, Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, and Lamar Jackson. Xavier, I know you might be a little bit biased, but who do you think is going to win the MVP this year?
I feel like I think they want Josh Allen to win, but I feel like the NFL is gonna pick Lamar Jackson just because of how great stats he has, and just because like they put him on first team All Pro also.
Yeah, that's true. And I know that this is supposed to be a regular season award, but I wonder if the playoff game between Josh Allen and Lamar is going to have any impact in that. I think it probably is still Lamar just because of all the really historic numbers that he had. He was the first ever quarterback to throw for 4,000 yards and run for 800 yards in a season. So that is definitely like historic. I think if Saquon maybe broke the record, Eric Dickerson's record, maybe he could have been considered as well. And if Joe Burrow's team won maybe a couple more games, maybe he could have been considered as well. But I think Lamar wins this one. If not Lamar, it's definitely going to be Josh Allen.
Yeah, definitely. Just the battle between those two quarterbacks, both deserving, and yeah.
Okay, let's get into Defensive Player of the Year. This is always a bit of a tough one for people who are maybe more casual fans, so we'll see what our thoughts are here. The finalists for Defensive Player of the Year: Zach Bond from the Philadelphia Eagles, Myles Garrett from the Cleveland Browns, Trey Hendrickson from the Bengals, Pat Surtain from the Broncos, and TJ Watt from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Xavier, who is your pick for Defensive Player of the Year?
Man, this is actually a really tough one because all these guys are so good, and of course Zach Bond up there. What an amazing year he's had. Mm, I, I think wait, um, I'm thinking between. I'm crossing out Zach Bond, even though I'm an Eagles fan, and Myles Garrett right now. Well, Trey Hendrickson, of course, got most sacks.
It's a tough award to give out, right?
Yeah, now I'm gonna wait. Yeah, Pat Surtain. I think I'm gonna predict Pat Surtain to win this, just because like he's literally shut down, like no one can get past him. But if not, I wouldn't be surprised if Trey Hendrickson or TJ Watt won.
Yeah, I always feel like trying to pick a defensive player of the year for a defensive end is always, or sorry, for a for a cornerback or a safety is always a little bit harder because you can't necessarily just look at the numbers. You have to also look at like how many times were they targeted, like were they always in such hard situation, were they always guarding the wide receivers so well that they just never got the ball because then you're not going to have the chance to get interceptions. But I think it is Sertan just because the Broncos were such a good defense all year long. I just also remembering in my head the pick six that he had for 99 yards earlier in the season. That was such a big one. And you always know that this guy is going to be on your number one wide receiver and going to make them have a pretty bad day. Even in the game against the Broncos, I remember specific, or against the Bengals, I remember specifically when Sertan was on one against Jamar Chase. It forced Joe Burrow to go over to T Higgins, and obviously, even though T Higgins scored a bunch of touchdowns and ended up winning the game for them, that's always a valuable thing for for a Denver team to force your number one wide receiver out. And so that is why I'm gonna be picking Pat Surtain as well. I would shout out
Yeah, and I
Trey
think
Hendrickson, but because the Bengals missed the playoffs and their defense was historically bad, I don't think we can give it to him.
yeah, I mean it's really tough to give the award to Trey Hendrickson when their defense was one of the worst in the league. But then over there you got Patrick Can. Broncos defense are amazing, and probably he's the best corner in the league right now.
Definitely. Okay, let's move on to Offensive Player of the Year. This isn't always an interesting one for me because it's interesting to try to figure out what the difference is between Offensive Player of the Year and MVP. But the people that were nominated for this one are Saquon Barkley, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Derrick Henry, and Lamar Jackson. So some of the MVP finalists, but not all of them. The new additions are Jamar and Derrick Henry, Xavier.
Um, well, of course you got the triple king Jamar Chase there, but then you also got Saquon. So it's like really, I'm just gonna pick Saquon just because of the amazing year he had, of course, and just 200 over 200 yards that last game. I mean, he's just doing so well, and on first year on the Eagles, just doing amazing. But I feel like the runner up for this one would be Jamar Chase, but like, yeah, I mean, you could. It's really hard to decide because you could pick one of the quarterbacks, but it's really how you judge it because Jamar Chase, triple king, Saquon almost beat the record.
Yeah, I feel like
It's
you would want to lean towards giving it to Lamar. However, I think having him and Derrick Henry in the same offense kind of proves that both of them were so good in helping each other that maybe we want to give it to somebody else. I'm gonna lean towards Jamar Chase just because he won the Triple Crown. I think that's a really cool accomplishment that he had, leading the NFL in receptions, yards, and receiving touchdowns. Very, very cool for somebody like him. And also, he was on both of our fantasy teams. He was on my fantasy team in one league, and he was on your fantasy team in our league. So I think we could both give him a shout out there. All right, let's move on to
Rookie of the Year.
Offensive Rookie of the Year. Now, this is probably a pretty easy one, but let's just give some shout outs to some of the other players that were nominated here. Brock Bowers, Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Bo Nix, and Brian Thomas Jr. Brock Bowers having one of the best tight end seasons ever as a rookie definitely deserves some respect. And Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors from LSU definitely both good. But I feel like we both know who the winner of this award is going to be, Xavier.
Yep. Like you said, it's a kind of a no-brainer right here. And of course, I'm going to give it to my boy Jaden Daniels. Even though we're playing them in the conference championship, I love the guy. He's just like one of the best rookie quarterbacks ever, if not the best. And what a year he's put together. And he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league only in his rookie year, which is amazing. Also in the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, really crazy stuff from him. If Brock Bowers was in a different rookie class, he would have won this one for sure. But I think Jaden Daniels, just being such an elite quarterback as a rookie, deserves this award for sure. Let's go to Defensive Rookie of the Year. You got two Eagles on this list, actually, and two Los Angeles Rams. So four defensive rookies in that game that you went to last Sunday. Cooper DeJean, Braden Fisk, Quinyon Mitchell, Chop Robinson from the Dolphins, and then Jared Verse. Who do you think is going to win this one?
I I I feel like Jared Verse is gonna win it, but I really do not want him to win. If not, I think it's gonna be Quinyon Mitchell. You know, he literally locked down every single receiver that he's basically played, and what a year he's had. And also Cooper DeJean, both great draft picks. Um, yeah, also like all these rookies are pretty good, but I really want Quinyon to win. It could be a toss up, but I just feel like they're gonna give it to Jared Verse just because of what great of a year he's had, like all those sacks, and of course that fumble recovery for a touchdown versus the Vikings in the wild card.
Yeah, that was a huge play for the rookie, and I mean he's just been so good. I think I have to give it to him, just because of when I'm remembering different plays from this season, I feel like he comes up the most in terms of like making these big superstar plays for the Rams. So that'll be my pick, but I definitely think either of the corners for the Eagles definitely could make it as well. Okay. Let's go really quickly through these last couple ones. Comeback player of the year is always an interesting one. You got Joe Burrow, Sam Darnold, J.K. Dobbins, Christian Gonzalez with the Patriots, and then DeMar Hamlin, who really became a starter for the Bills on the defensive end this year. Who do you think wins this award?
Well, shout out to Damar Hamlin for having such a great year, but I really think it's between Sam and well, Joe Burrow. He did come back from that injury, but I feel like he kind of didn't have that off of a year than what Sam J.K. Dobbins season injury and Sam Darnold just horrible. I think they're gonna have to just give it to Sam Darnold for the year that he put together. Of course, he's a great quarterback, and everyone thought he was gonna suck, and he wasn't supposed to be the starter. Then he came in and absolutely crushed it, having an amazing season and like what people expected out of him in his rookie year.
Yeah, if Dobbins didn't get hurt, would have given it to him probably, but because of how bad that injury looked like a couple years ago. But yeah, I think it has to be Sam as well, just because of how he went from almost a nobody to not even listed as a starter going into training camp to then being a Pro Bowler. I mean, that's just an incredible story. Okay, last one quickly. We'll go through Coach of the Year and Assistant Coach of the Year. For Coach of the Year, Dan Campbell, Kevin O'Connell, Sean Payton, Dan Quinn, Andy Reid. For Assistant Coach of the Year, we got Joe Brady of the Bills, Vic Fangio of the Eagles, Brian Flores of the Vikings, Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson, both of the Lions. Xavier, who you got for both of these?
For Coach of the Year, I got Dan Quinn just because last year they were 4-13, and now they're in the conference championship. So I think you got to give it to him. And for assistant coach of the year, just the powerhouse Lions offense with all the great plays. I feel like he's got to give it to Ben Johnson.
So I think I'll give it to Kevin O'Connell because of the expectations that the Vikings had going into the year versus how he was able to really rally the troops and have a really solid season. And then for assistant coach of the year, I think I agree with you. I'll go with Ben Johnson because of all the crazy plays that he was designing. Although Brian Flores definitely deserves a shout out as well. Okay, we went through all the awards, Xavier. We got a few minutes left. Let's go through the conference championship games. We're going to start with the earlier game in the NFC, Commanders versus the Eagles, a trip to the Super Bowl on the line between two divisional rivals. I know you're excited for some revenge because the Commanders beat the Eagles towards the end of the regular season, but they were without Jalen Hurts. You think that's going to be a big difference this time around?
Yeah, no, he's gonna show up in the conference championship, but I gotta give it to the Eagles right here. I definitely think it's gonna be a pretty close game, relatively close game, but I think Eagles are gonna come on top. Let's say final score 31-24.
Yeah, I mean, the Commanders didn't do a great job of stopping Jahmyr Gibbs in the game against the Lions, so I've imagined that Saquon Barkley is going to be a big part of this conference championship game, especially because it's so cold here in the Northeast. So I imagine Philly is also going to be pretty cold. But for some reason, I feel like this could be the year the Commanders go on this miracle run. I know you wouldn't be very happy about it, Xavier, but I'll try to be the contrarian here. I'll pick the Washington Commanders to win this game. What's your final score prediction?
31-21.
Okay, I'll have the Commanders winning this one. Let's say 27 to 20. So the one touchdown game, maybe a little bit lower scoring than the one against the Lions, but I really like Jaden Daniels and the magic that he could potentially create. Okay.
Okay, I hear you out, but yeah.
I just want to be I'll play the villain here in this one, and then once if the Eagles win, then you can come back and be super happy that your team's in the Super Bowl. And then we'll go over to the AFC, which is going to be a really big game as well. Chiefs Bills. I mean, these guys have played each other so many times. The Bills won early in the regular season though.
Yeah, and that definitely gives some reasoning here. Man, I've just got the Bills in this one. And yeah, I'm taking the Bills. Let's go. I know it's gonna be close just because they're playing the Chiefs. Um, let's go 28-24 vintage Mahomes and Allen game, and it's just gonna be like a thriller.
Okay, I mean, I feel like Mahomes and the Chiefs definitely want revenge after the Bills had gave them like their biggest loss of the season. That wasn't like the last game. So I think the Chiefs are gonna find some way. Although I really want the Bills to win this game, Xavier. I think I'm gonna pick the Chiefs because they're at home. I think that again, Kelsey's gonna have a big game, and Mahomes is gonna do his thing. I think the defense for Kansas City is gonna really come to play at this one at Arrowhead. I'll have them winning this one. Very close game, 20-19 final score. So I think either way, regardless of how these results go, we're going to get such a fun, exciting Super Bowl matchup, Xavier. I know I'm excited for it. You're going to definitely be excited for it as well. But that's going to do it for this episode of This Week in Football. We talked about so much cool stuff as the NFL is looking like it's headed for one of the best weeks of the year. Thank you so much for watching, Xavier. What do you have to say?
Peace.
Peace out, everyone. See you next week.